Welcome to the next chapter. It is respiration. Respiration is the breakdown of food substances by enzymes in the cells to release energy. All living organisms require energy to carry out life processes, and so all of them do carry out respiration. During respiration, the chemical energy in organic molecules is released through oxidation. The ultimate source of energy is the sun. In photosynthesis, green plants trap this energy and use it to form carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Since no energy is lost in the process, these food substances contain chemical energy. Green plants are called primary producers. Animals then obtain energy by feeding on plants or other animals that had fed on plants. During respiration, oxygen is used up. Carbon dioxide, water, and alcohol or lactic acid are formed. When there is enough oxygen during respiration, alcohol or lactic acids are not formed. The respiration process is also called tissue or cellular or internal respiration. Tissue respiration. Respiration takes place in the mitochondria. The mitochondria has an inner and an outer membrane. The inner membrane is folded to form numerous projections called cristae. The two membranes are separated by a fluid-filled cavity. Respiratory enzymes are found on the cristae. The innermost cavity is called a matrix. Active cells such as sperm cells and muscle cells have many mitochondria. Generally, there are two types of respiration, namely aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic respiration. In aerobic respiration, oxygen is used in the breakdown of glucose in the cells to release carbon dioxide and water. However, the water is not formed directly, but hydrogen combines with oxygen from the atmosphere to form water. Sometimes hydrogen peroxide is formed. The enzyme catalase breaks down the hydrogen peroxide into water and oxygen as shown on this equation. The overall equation of aerobic respiration can be represented as shown here. 1 molecule of glucose combines with 6 molecules of oxygen catalyzed by enzymes to form 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of water, and 2,881 kilojoules of energy. During respiration, the energy is released in small bits for efficient use and storage. If all the energy was released at once, massive heat could be generated, which could damage the cells. Aerobic respiration occurs in two phases, namely glycolysis and citric acid cycle. Glycolysis. Glycolysis occurs in the cell cytoplasm and does not require oxygen. During glycolysis, glucose is enzymatically broken down in a series of steps to produce 2,3-carbon compounds called pyruvic acid. Glycolysis involves formation of several intermediates between glucose and the pyruvic acid. Glucose has 6 carbons, but pyruvic acid has 3 carbons. So for every 1 molecule of glucose that undergoes glycolysis, 2 molecules of pyruvic acid are formed. Energy in cells is released in the form of a compound called adenosine triphosphate, abbreviated ATP. The pyruvic acid from glycolysis then enters the citric acid cycle, the second phase of aerobic respiration. The citric acid cycle is also called the Krebs cycle. It occurs in the mitochondria. It requires oxygen. Notice the sharp contrast with glycolysis. The pyruvic acid enters the mitochondria in the presence of oxygen. The acid is converted to a 2-carbon compound called acetyl coenzyme A, abbreviated as acetyl-CoA. In the conversion, carbon dioxide is given out. 2 hydrogen atoms are also lost from the pyruvic acid. Again, the cycle involves a series of conversion of various intermediates. In the end, 30 ATP molecules are produced. Therefore, at the end of the aerobic respiration, 38 ATP molecules are produced, 8 from glycolysis and 30 from the Krebs cycle. The overall equation of the reaction taking place in the Krebs cycle is shown on your screen. 2 molecules of pyruvic acid combine with 7 molecules of oxygen. They are enzymatically broken down to release 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of water, and a massive amount of energy. Now again, let us take a quick shot on the process of respiration. We have seen that food, after being digested and absorbed, is transported in blood to cells for incorporation into cell metabolism. The food materials are metabolized to release energy in a process called respiration or cellular respiration. The overall goal is to make ATP, a high energy molecule, which releases this energy upon demand. Cellular respiration is a complex process that begins with glycolysis. The name itself means splitting sugar. Now that is the basic structure of a glucose molecule, and I don't want you to dwell on that much. We also saw that in glycolysis some energy is first invested in the process, but eventually we get more energy, and that's why we talk of the net energy yield. So 2 ATP molecules are first invested in the process, and in a series of steps, the 6-carbon compound splits into 2 molecules, each with 3 carbons. In the energy harvesting part, the 2 molecules are converted to pyruvate or pyruvic acid, and 4 ATP molecules are also formed. The process is much more complex than that, and it involves a couple of enzymes. In the end, a net of 2 ATP molecules and 2 pyruvate molecules are formed. In aerobic respiration, the pyruvate enters the mitochondria ready for the next stage. The pyruvate enters the mitochondria where it undergoes oxidation. Each pyruvate or pyruvic acid molecule is converted to acetyl coenzyme A, which is a 2-carbon compound. Now, that compound you see there, NADH, carries electrons, and again, I don't want you to pay much attention to that. In the process, carbon dioxide is also lost. Acetyl-CoA now enters the Krebs cycle. And in a cycle of reactions beginning with a compound called oxaloacetate, the pyruvic acid ends up as carbon dioxide and water. It is a cycle because the oxaloacetate is the starting and the ending compound. ATP. ATP is made up of adenosine linked to a ribose sugar and 3 phosphate groups. It is synthesized from adenosine diphosphate ADP and an inorganic phosphate. The bond formed between ADP and the inorganic phosphate requires energy. The energy used is released when the bond is broken. ATP is an instant source of energy for cellular processes. It is hydrolyzed to form ADP, an inorganic phosphate, and energy. Well, then up to that point we get our first assignment and discuss the uses of energy in the cell. Discuss the use of energy in the cells. Next, we move to anaerobic respiration, and anaerobic respiration occurs in the absence of oxygen. Plants oxidize glucose in the absence of oxygen to give ethanol, carbon dioxide, and energy, as shown by the equation on your screen. Now, this process is also called fermentation and occurs when bacteria or fungi break down glucose to form carbon dioxide, alcohol, and energy. In animals, anaerobic respiration leads to formation of lactic acid and energy, as shown on your screen. During strenuous exercise, the muscle cells respire anaerobically, causing buildup of lactic acid in the muscle cells. The lactic acid is toxic to the cells and is converted to carbon dioxide and water. During vigorous exercise, the oxygen demand exceeds the oxygen supply, and this causes what we call oxygen debt or deficit. An animal experiencing oxygen debt will breathe faster or gasp for oxygen to convert the lactic acid to carbon dioxide and water. The heart also beats faster to pump blood to supply the oxygen and remove carbon dioxide. Buildup of lactic acid in muscle cells causes muscle fatigue. In certain instances, some of the lactic acid is converted back to glucose. This glucose is converted to glycogen for storage in the liver. At the end of anaerobic respiration, 4 ATP molecules are formed from 1 glucose molecule. 2 ATP molecules are used up during glycolysis, and thus the net yield is 2 ATP molecules. Anaerobic organisms. Organisms that can respire in the absence of oxygen are said to be anaerobic. They are called anaerobes. They include some bacteria and fungi. There are 2 categories of anaerobes. Obligate anaerobes respire in the absence of oxygen and would die if oxygen was present. Enzyme catalase to break down hydrogen peroxide, which kills them. Examples include the E. coli, Bacillus subtilis, Clostridium botulinum, and Clostridium tetani. Facultative anaerobes can respire both in the presence or absence of oxygen. Examples include fungi like yeast, most bacteria, and parasites. Now, overall, anaerobic respiration is an inefficient process that yields very little amount of energy. Due to lack of oxygen, there is incomplete oxidation of substrates. Further notice that unlike Krebs cycle, glycolysis is an anaerobic process. There goes your second assignment, and discuss the application of anaerobic respiration in industrial and domestic settings. Discuss the application of anaerobic respiration in the industrial and domestic setups. Substrates for respiration. The three classes of foods, that is carbohydrates, proteins and lipids, are oxidized to release energy. Carbohydrates. The cells prefer to oxidize carbohydrates unless during unavailability. They are the most commonly oxidized substrates. Carbohydrates are stored in the form of polysaccharides, starch in plants, and glycogen in animals. To be oxidized, they must be hydrolyzed into simple monosaccharides such as glucose. The other monosaccharides, that is fructose and galactose, enter the glycolytic pathway as well. 1 gram of carbohydrate would yield 17 kilojoules of energy when oxidized. Lipids. When carbohydrates are depleted, the body will opt to oxidize fats. Fats are found stored as adipose tissue in the body. Fats are broken down by enzymes called lipases into fatty acids and glycerol before being oxidized. However, a lot of energy input is required to oxidize 1 gram of fat, and thus the net yield is less. Oxidation of fats releases metabolic water and leads to loss of body mass. Proteins. Proteins are the last resort for oxidation when both carbohydrate and fats are depleted. This occurs during prolonged starvation, and the individual is seen as undergoing muscle wasting. The body reduces in size and mass. Proteins are hydrolyzed by enzymes protease into amino acids. The amino acids are deaminated to urea and a carboxyl group, which are oxidized to release energy. 1 gram of protein releases 22 kilojoules of energy when oxidized. Respiratory quotient. Respiratory quotient is the ratio of the volume of carbon dioxide given out to the volume of oxygen taken in per unit time during respiration. Respiratory quotient is given by volume of carbon dioxide given out over the volume of oxygen taken in. In aerobic respiration of carbohydrates, the respiratory quotient is 1. The reason is that we have 6 volumes of carbon dioxide over 6 volumes of oxygen, which gives a ratio of 1:1. Respiratory quotient is an indicator of aerobic or anaerobic respiration. In fat oxidation, respiratory quotient is approximately 0.7 and 0.9 for protein oxidation. Respiratory quotient is greater than 1 in anaerobic respiration. Finally, factors affecting the rate of respiration. Now, considering that respiration is the process that yields energy for fueling cellular processes, it only means that the same factors that affect the energy demand in an organism affect the rate of respiration. Now, these factors include such like age, surface area to volume ratio, concentration of carbon dioxide, presence or availability of substrate, and so on and so on. These factors were dealt with in level 1 of this video books. Now, in your last assignment, discuss these factors that affect the rate of respiration.
Without many of these discoveries and inventions, few of us would be alive today. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 greatest medical breakthroughs in history. Number 1. Vaccines. Taking the top spot on our list is the late 18th century discovery by English physician and scientist Edward Jenner that led to the vaccine for smallpox. The fields of science and medicine were revolutionized by his work, which forever changed the way we approach the prevention and reduction of disease. Since then, vaccinations have been used to protect humans against many other infectious diseases such as rabies, polio, measles, mumps, and influenza.